Well, hello, GSMST. This is Mr. Holmes Williams here, and I wanted to be of assistance to those students who may be struggling a bit trying to get their JavaScript to talk with their HTML and still figuring out how to make HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as their own separate languages be able to combine together to create great web apps and websites that we all know and love. So we are starting off with a clean slate because we're going to go through the fundamentals of HTML, of CSS, and JavaScript throughout the tutorial. So if you have missed any days of school or you are still figuring out your way around these three wonderful technologies, I want to make sure this is a good tutorial for all of that. So firstly, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we do have our assets here. So first off, we have our index.html page, which is the home page of this wonderful website and the only page I'm going to add to this wonderful website. And then we have a folder that is nerds, and this has 5 different nerd pictures. So you can see what those are on the side there. So we're going to go ahead and generate our base code for HTML. Any HTML document that you have should have the following elements. So first off, at the very top, you should have your doc type HTML tag. That should go at the top. And then after that, you then open and close your HTML element using the opening and closing HTML tag. So you can do HTML. And because CodeHS is so awesome and wants to help you succeed, it automatically gives you the closing tag of the HTML element. Within the HTML element, we're going to then go and put in our body and head elements. So first goes head, because head goes on top of body, right? Just look at yourself. That's where it goes. And then under head, we have body. So again, we have doc type, HTML tag, we have our HTML element, which is this whole thing, right, with the opening and closing HTML tags. We have the head element with the opening and closing head tags, and then we have the body element with the opening and closing body tags, right? So when I say tag, I mean either the opening or the closing, or a single tag that doesn't have an opening or a closing. And then element is when you're combining those two, okay? So one thing you all should definitely put inside your head element, if nothing else, is the title element. So again, when I say title element, I mean the opening and closing title tags. So I'm going to put that in here, and I'm going to put in nerd generator. And so the nerd generator here, where this will show up is when you save this and put this inside of a new screen, you'll see at the very top where you have your tab. That is where that text that you put inside of your title element is going to show up. All right, now that we've done that, we're now going to start working on the body of our website. As a reminder, nothing goes inside of head other than things that help to either talk about your website or to link your JavaScript or CSS pages. Anything content-wise on your website should go in body. Even things like the header, which you may think, oh, header, head, put the header in the head. No. Put your header inside of your body because the body is the body of your website. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a H1 element, which again has the opening and closing H1 tags. And I'm going to put in between these tags, what type of nerd are you? With 3 exclamation points. And then underneath that element, I'm going to then add in a button, and that is by the button element. So we're going to go in and we're going to do B-U-T-T-O-N. Bam. Again, CodeHS is awesome because it does help you out there. And then in this button, I want to say, I'm feeling lucky. Kind of like how you have the button, I'm feeling lucky on Google, for those of you all who may or may not be old enough to know what that button does or is. So just to save it, right, make sure my code works. We can see that we have our H1 and we have our button, right? And so one thing that we've been telling you all to do is that please code iteratively, meaning code a little bit, run it, make sure it works, then code some more, make sure it works, run it, etc. So that you don't get to the point where you're frustrated because something doesn't work because you unfortunately did not catch when you might have made a mistake, okay? And so these are the 2 things that I'm going to have visible on my screen. So this is all you're going to see until you see everything else. So I am going to add in one more thing before we go, which is going to be an empty P element. And so the P element is going to be where we print out, using JavaScript, some descriptions of what our different types of nerds are. All right, before we stop and go into JavaScript and CSS, I do want to go ahead and point out you do have to link your two external pages to your HTML document. So let's first generate our CSS and our JavaScript documents. So go over here to New, do File, and then we're just going to call this style.css. And you can make this any name you want. Style.css is very typical of what you will find your CSS names to be, but you can make it anything you want. But you have to make sure you have the .css file name afterward. Excuse me. So I'm going to add that. We have our style.css now. And now I'm going to put in my script.js for JavaScript. And again, this is just the common name for any JavaScript document. However, you can make anything a name. Just make sure you have the .js file name afterward. So now we have all three of our wonderful technologies that's going to make our website, our nerd generator, truly shine. So now we know the names of our two documents. Now we can then link them. So the other use of the head element, other than using the title element to have your title in your tab, is to then link your CSS and your JavaScript document. So let's do that now. You link your CSS document by doing the link element, and then you do two things. First off, you do href, which is going to be an attribute. If you remember what attributes are, it's the attribute's name equals and then something in quotes. In this case, the something in quotes is going to be the name of your document, which is your CSS document. And so we have style.css. And then we also have another attribute called rel, which is short for relationship. And so we're just going to say in our quotes, style sheet. The reason why we add this is so that we know, okay, what is this thing that we're linking? Oh, in this case, this is our style sheet. And link is one of those rare cases, like other tags, like the image tag, where it actually does not have a closing tag. So this is self-closing. So we're just going to add in our ending angle bracket, and that is going to end that. So now, if we do anything inside of CSS, it will now be linked to this page. The next thing we can do here is we can link our JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is not using the link tag. It is now using the script element. So we're going to do script. And this, like most of the other elements on our screen, has an opening and a closing tag. So opening here, closing here. And so you always add attributes in the beginning tag of whatever element you are calling. So I want to add attributes. I'm going to go to the beginning or the starting tag within my script element. I'm going to add in src, which is going to be the attribute that's going to link our JavaScript page to our HTML. And again, I'm just going to call it by name. And the reason why I'm able just to call style.css, and in this one, I'm going to call script.js, is because if you notice, all of them are not in a folder, and they're all in what we call the root of our file management system. Okay, so since they're all on the same level, we can just call them by name. But if they were in a folder, we will have to call the folder name / then we'd call the actual sheet. Okay. So now that we've done that, we now have appropriately linked both our JavaScript and our CSS to our HTML page, and now we can manipulate those technologies. Now, before we head there, we are going to add in some IDs. So to each one of these elements, I'm going to add in an attribute called ID, and I'm going to give them a unique ID. And that is how I'm going to be able to connect these to my JavaScript, because the way that we've taught you JavaScript is by using a certain phrase, document.getElementById. And so if you want to access an element by its ID name inside of HTML, well, you have to have an ID for every single element. So for my H1, I'm just going to put down ID equals H1, just to make it simple. And then I'm going to do ID equals for my button, I'm going to say lucky. And then finally, I'm going to add in an ID attribute inside of my P element, and I'm going to name this nerd P. Okay, nerd para. There you go, nerd paragraph. I like that. So now that we have given IDs to every single one of our elements, now we can transition to our JavaScript to add functionality to our code. Now you may be asking, Mr. Holmes-Williams, why don't you add CSS and make this thing look a little bit more pretty? Because right now it's looking kind of boring. Well, if you think about it, you want to make sure that whatever code you're adding in to make your games or your web apps work, you want to confirm that you're having them function, which is going to be your JavaScript, before you try to add any style to it. Plus, we're going to use JavaScript in some ways to add styling to our page. So I'll show you how to do that as well. So now that we know what our IDs are, we can now go and we can add in some functions within JavaScript. So let's go over to our script.javascript. So again, we have our clear JavaScript layout, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you a big secret. You probably want to put most of your code, if not all of your code, within functions. Because what we want to do is, when we click on this I'm feeling lucky button, we want it to then trigger a function that we set up inside of our JavaScript page to then run. So we're going to go ahead and set up our function now. So the way you set up functions inside of JavaScript is you do function, and you see how it changes color. That means it is a reserved word. So you know that you're doing something right when stuff changes colors. Remember that color can be a very good indication as to whether or not something is wrong with your code. That is one way to tell, but not the only one. And so I'm going to name this nerd funked. And then I'm going to add in my parentheses. One thing that I always see people getting wrong is that you have to make sure that if you are using a function that you add in those parentheses at the end. If you do not add in the parentheses, then it is not a function, okay? So if you notice, before I put the parentheses in, this is black. Once I put those parentheses in, it then turns a beautiful blue. So again, using color to see whether or not something is right or wrong. Now, because we're in JavaScript, to get to the body of our function, we want to use curly brackets. So we're going to use curly brackets, and when you press enter, again, CodeHS coming in for the win, it automatically creates the second curly bracket. So everything that you want to run when you call this particular function is going to go in between these curly brackets. So now that we have a function name that we want to activate when we click on our button, we now need to go back to our HTML and add in an attribute called onClick. So let's do that now. So now I found my button. So right behind our ID attribute, we're going to add in an attribute called onClick equals something in quotes. So again, all IDs follow the same format. ID name, or not ID name, the attribute name equals something in quotes. In this case, I do want to actually put my function name in the quotes. So my function name was nerd funked. And then again, it is not a function without those parentheses. So make sure you add the parentheses. So now when I click on my button, it is then going to activate the nerd funked that I have now set up inside of my function. Now when I save this and I refresh this, obviously nothing's going to happen because guess what? We haven't actually added anything to our code. But once we do, it's going to generate some stuff for us. So what I want to happen is I want to have a randomly generated number choose between our 5 different nerds. So we have our basic nerd, our computer nerd, cool nerd, GSMST nerd, and our nerdy nerd. And these pictures all have different people and representations to them. So first I need to get a variable within my function that will then generate a random number. So I'm going to do that by using the aptly named random variable. So the way that you set up variables within JavaScript is by using, basically just to make it simple, the keyword let. Let, L-E-T, is how you initialize any variable. You're basically saying to JavaScript, hey, I want to create a new variable that I want you to save in your memory. Once you have initialized a variable once, you no longer have to use the let initializing term ever again. So you use it once and then you never have to think about it ever again. So I'm going to say let rand num equal. And again, the equal sign, if you remember from Python, is not equals, it is the assignment operator. So we're assigning something on the right-hand side of this operator to the left-hand side of the operator, which is our variable name, rand num. So I'm going to use one of the terms that we should be very familiar with, but if you're not, I'm going to show you it again. It is called document dot, and you see how document changed colors once I completed it. Document dot get element by ID. Dot, or not dot, parentheses. And again, you notice how before I put the parentheses for our get element by ID, it's black. But once I put in my parentheses, it has a slight shift in tone. It's more of like a bluish gray. So again, colors are a big part in how you can help debug yourself. Because let's say I lowercase the I here. You see how it's still black? But once I uppercase that I, it now has, again, a little bit of a grayish blue color. So one of the things I see a lot of people doing that is causing them to pull out their hair or feel frustrated is that they may miscapitalize something in here. Maybe they capitalize the G, or they don't remember to only capitalize the E in element, the B in by, and the I in D. And so again, you can use whether or not it has changed tones in color to denote whether or not you've written that statement correctly. Now, of course, what's going to go inside of here? Well, absolutely nothing, because I just showed you something that totally does not relate to what I'm trying to do. I'm doing this off the cuff, y'all, so do help me up. Do apologize, but we will be using the document.getElementById statement later. This is actually where we're going to hold our actual random number, and how we do that is by using math.floor, and this is a function. Within this function, we're going to do math dot, hold on, I'm getting it, random. There you go. And that is also a function. So again, do not forget your parentheses, right? So math is a library within JavaScript. And so within JavaScript, they have different functions that you can then select. So math, the library math, has a function floor that will floor anything within its parentheses. And then random is then just going to give you a randomly generated number between 0 and 1. So really it will be a float. And so what you want to do is, if you have a list, let's say a list of 5 things, like I have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you want to essentially multiply your math.random within your math.floor by the number of items. And that is going to give you the perfect way to index from 0 to 4, or 1 less than whatever number you get. So I'm going to multiply this times 5. Not to get too deep in the weeds, but if I give you this example, math.random can give you anything between 0 and 1. So let's say it randomly generates 0.5. It will multiply 0.5 times 5, which would then be 2.5. And then since this is inside of the math.floor function, it would then lower that to 2. So then you would get index 2 when you're indexing through a list. I'm going to save my code. Nothing's going to actually do anything yet, but you can do a little bit of debugging to ensure that you've properly given a value that your list can use from your random number variable by using the alert function. So I'm going to do alert. I'm going to do rand num. Okay. And one thing I did not do, which I want to make sure that we do, is that we add semicolons behind all of our statements. Okay, semicolons are definitely what you want to do. Technically, you don't need semicolons. Now, I just said that, but don't listen to that. Technically, you can write all your JavaScript without putting a single semicolon, and it will work perfectly. However, it is best coding practice to add in semicolons behind every statement that you make, okay? So I'm going to refresh my page here, which is going to save it. And now when I press this button, it should run the function nerdfunct. It should assign random num a random integer between 0 and 4. And then I'll be able to see what that random number is with our alert. So I'm going to press I'm feeling lucky, and you can see our random number is 1. I press OK, I press it again, random number is 0. Let's see if we can get all of our numbers. So 1 again, 3 now, 3 again, all right, 1 again, can we get 2? There's 2. 4, so again, my theory is correct, right? Goes up to 4, and there goes 2. So you can see, using the alert function, you can test to see whether or not your variables are actually holding the values that you expect them to. And to just make sure that we remember what this does, I'll just say randomly generates a number between 0 and 4. And again, if we remember how we index, right, if we have 5 list items like we're going to have, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inside of our list, this first one will be index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which means that this function will cover all of our images inside of our list. And speaking of that list, let's go ahead and initialize that list. So again, when you're initializing a variable that's going to, in this case, hold a list, you want to use let. So let, and I'm just going to say nerd list equals, or is assigned, the following list. Now lists inside of JavaScript can also be called arrays, and they look exactly like you would see them inside of Python. So you're going to use your square brackets, and then you're just going to simply put your different things inside of here. So here, I am going to add in the paths to our different pictures. Again, I'm doing this off the fly, so I haven't actually created this program. So if I make any mistakes, this will be a great time to show you how I debug while I'm on the fly. Okay, so essentially what I want to do is eventually, and this is where planning goes in, and I've already planned it out. You don't see the planning, but I'm telling you, I planned it out to where I want to essentially change the background image of my website to then be one of these 5 images, randomly selected using our random variable. Okay, so because I'm doing that, I need to create the path to that image from my index. So the path to all these images from my index is going to be going to the nerds folder / whatever the image name is. So let's do that. So I'm going to put inside of quotes, because we will need to do this in quotes because these are strings. We're going to do nerds / and we're just going to do basic nerd dot JPEG. And again, you want to make sure that you're including the file extensions of these different JPEGs. Then I'm going to do nerds / computer nerd dot JPEG. And again, you want to match cases with how you've named your file. So this is a lowercase c, not an uppercase c. We're going to add in the next one. So nerds / and then we're going to do cool nerd dot JPEG, comma, do our next one, nerds / GSMST nerd dot PNG. And again, denote that in this case, we don't have a JPEG, but we do have a PNG. So don't just get in the habit of just writing JPEG, because not all of your images are going to be JPEGs. Some of them may be PNGs, some of them may be GIFs, etc., etc. And then finally, we're going to add in our last nerd image. So we're going to do nerd. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, yeah. Nerd / and then we're going to do nerdy nerd dot JPEG. what did I do? So you see how this is a different color? What did I do wrong? Oh my goodness, I left off my closing quotes around this one, and you see how it then affected how this one showed up. You saw everything else is this beautiful blue, and now this one is this black. And black is beautiful, trust me. But black is something that you really only see with variable names. You see everything else other than the variable names and some of these characters are black. Everything else has a color to it. And that is by choice or by purpose to show you when something might be wrong. So once I put this quote here, you see how everything now falls in place the way it should be. So again, I cannot stress you all enough how much color can really help you denote whether or not you're doing something correctly. I instantly knew something was wrong because everything else in my list was blue, but this was not. So I was like, okay, what did I do wrong? And I caught it before I got 50 lines deep inside my JavaScript, and I'm wondering why my list isn't working, okay? And again, just because it's good coding practice, I'm going to add in a colon at the end. So we have our list. So now we need to make an if statement, okay? Again, I'm doing this on the fly, so if I make any mistakes, I will be sure to tell you how I will tell when I make a mistake and how you can then solve it on your end. So I'm going to make if, and I'm going to do, so one thing before I do the if statement, you can see how all of the conditionals within your if or else if statements all go inside of parentheses. So unlike Python, where you'll just put the condition and then a colon, you have to put your conditionals within quotes, not within quotes, within parentheses after your if or else if name, okay? So sometimes you will have problems with your code and you'll just forget that one little thing and it'll make everything not run. So just be mindful of that. All right, let's keep on going. So if I do this correctly, what I want to do is nerd list, and I want to index it. Now, how do you index? It's the same exact way you index in any other programming language using our non-curly brackets or our square brackets. I'm indexing at my rand num. So if nerd list at rand num is equivalent, so you can either use, from what I've seen, either equals equals, which we've used before in Python, or you can add in another equal if you're extra. Both of these, from my knowledge, work exactly the same. Just to keep with what you've learned in Python, I'm going to keep it as a double equals just to show that it works, right? But triple equals should also work. So if it equals, and I'm just going to index, so nerd list at index 0, which would be this barra right here, then I'm going to do something. But before I do that, because I want to make sure that my code actually works before I initialize it, I'm going to take out my alert up here because I already know that my random num variable works. I'm actually going to test to make sure that I'm getting the right outputs using this notation right here. So I'm going to do an alert down here. I'm going to do nerd list, and I'm going to index at rand num, end it with a colon, semicolon, excuse me. And I'm going to refresh my page, which is going to save it. And now when I run this, you see here, we're getting different things. So I have my cool nerd, GSMST nerd, can't get my nerdy nerd, computer nerd. Ah, darn it, the worst kind of nerd. Computer nerd, it looks like they really love computer nerd. Cool nerd, so we have cool nerd, JSMST nerd, computer nerd. All right, there we go, JSMST nerd, nerdy nerd. So we can see that we've been able to get, we can see that we're generating the right stuff. So we're on the right path. So now that we've confirmed that we are good with this part of our code, we can now then go and start our if statement. All right, so again, iteratively coding helps you. Even though this may seem self-explanatory, or it's like, oh my goodness, Mr. Holmes, you're going too slow, this is too simple, like go to the advanced stuff. It never hurts for you to check, because you don't want to get, again, 50 lines deep in your code and something isn't working and you're spending 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever minutes figuring out what in the world happened. So you check things as you go using stuff like the alert function in order to help you all know that everything's working. By doing the alert function, I not only check to make sure that my on-click function was working, right? So I knew that I did it correctly, but I'm also checking that the variables within that function are also functioning. So it's twofold. So don't forget it. All right, let's go back and let's uncomment our if statement. And so again, brackets are the name of the game here. So the body of my if statement needs to be within brackets. And having this many brackets around each other can be very confusing. So I'll show you a really cool way to make sure that you're properly opening and closing all of your if, else if, and function statements. So we have our brackets now. And I'm just going to go ahead and take out some of the space so it doesn't look as daunting. I'm going to leave that space there though. One thing you can do to make sure that you have matching brackets to where they're supposed to be, we know that everything here should be within our function. So when we go up here to our bracket, you may not be able to see it that well, but there's a little bubble around the bracket. And that bubble will then match up with the corresponding ending bracket bubble of where that function ends. So you can see this bracket is around all the code we just wrote. Same thing here. You can see here, we go to the starting bracket, it has a little bubble around it. Guess what also has the bubble around it? It's ending bracket. So again, a common problem I see amongst our students is that maybe you forgot to add an extra a curly bracket, or maybe you have an extra one that you weren't supposed to have. Either way, you want to make sure that you are properly closing all of your functions, else if statements, etc. All right, so now we go here. So this is where the fun kind of starts, okay? So we're going to, actually before we get here, let's go ahead and do it at the top. I know I'm going out of order, but I'm showing you how messy code can be, right? So when I see some of you all, I'm not going to name any names, doing code right in order, everything is perfect, line by line, it gives me a little bit of anxiety because programming is messy. It's not always clear. It can be very out of order and unconcise. And so something I need to make sure I do, which I was meaning to do earlier that I mistakenly did for my random, is connect my button, my P element inside of my code. So I'm going to do that right now. So the thing I'm going to connect right now is my P element. So I'm going to do, I'm going to say nerd paragraph, okay? I'm just going to spell it all out, is assigned this. And so this is what we're going to get that to our document dot get element by ID, do our wonderful parentheses. And you see how, again, it's black. It's because I capitalized the G here instead of lowercasing it like it should be. Once I put that in there, you see how it's not black. It now has, again, that bluish gray. And inside of the parentheses, you're going to put your quotes, and you're going to then get the name of the element you're trying to connect to this variable. So since I'm trying to connect my paragraph, so I can change the paragraph and whatnot, I'm going to go to my index, and I'm going to go look, make sure I see it. Ooh, I gave it nerdy para. Now you all won't be able to copy and paste, but I can. But just to share your struggle, I will type it out. Nerd para. And that's the end. So now every single time we call the variable name nerd paragraph, it is now referring to and is going to essentially change something about that particular element. In this case, our P element that we cannot see, but we know is there. All right, so now we can actually start doing some manipulations. So if nerd list at the random number is equal to the first index, which would be 0 of our nerd list, we want to do the following. We want to go to nerd paragraph, and we want to do nerd paragraph, which is essentially this bit right here, and we want to use the dot inner HTML call equals, and then basically wherever we want to show up in that particular space. So we're going to say, this is the most basic of nerds. Beware of their basicness. There we go. So I'm going to leave this open like this because I'm going to add some more code, but I want to check to see if this works. So I'm going to save this, refresh my page. So the type of nerd we're looking for, and we're actually going to put an alert here again, is going to be the nerds here. So this type of nerd. So we know that if we get the first index, which is, the first index, which is index 0 within this list, which is going to be our basic nerd, then we should see text that says something like this. So we're going to go here, and we're just going to do nerd list, and we're just going to do rand num. So wherever the random number generator pops out, once we see nerds / basic nerd.jpg, we know that it has, it should show this up where our P element is. So we're going to refresh that, refresh our page. I'm feeling lucky. We got the basic nerd on the first try. Press OK, and bam. So we see that our code is working. So again, before you start writing every single if and else if statement, iteratively check if what your code is doing is right. So now that I know that this piece of code is working, now I can work on my other pieces of code. So one thing I want to do is I want to change the structure, or not structure, I want to change the background image of my particular HTML document and replace it with the images corresponding with our if statement. So what I'm going to do is go back to my index.html. I'm actually going to add in the body, because again, the body is where the content goes. So anything you see on the screen is in body. And I'm going to add in an ID to this. And I'm going to call it body. I'm just going to be uninventive. So the ID here is body. So now we're going to, again, at the top, we're going to do let body equal document.get element by ID. I spelled it correctly. And in quotes, I'm going to do body. Okay? And so then I'm just going to simply say body dot style. This is something that you can learn pretty quickly with a quick Google search on how to manipulate your style using JavaScript. You use the style call, and then you do dot, and then you say what property do you want to change from CSS within your JavaScript. In this case, I want to do background color. And again, you can figure out what these are pretty quickly by doing a quick Google search, right? Since you already know, or should know, all about CSS and the different properties that you can use, like background color or background image, all that good stuff, you should be able to figure this out pretty quickly. And I'm going to make this, just to test it out, equal to, in quotes, black. Nope, I want to make it equal to pink, because why not? So I'm going to confirm that this works, that I've properly linked my body using the document.get element by ID here. I'm going to save this. Refresh it, refresh this. I'm feeling lucky. Wrong one. I need the basic nerd. Oh, there goes the basic nerd. And now our background color should change. So again, you put IDs on stuff on different elements inside of your HTML. You then go on your JavaScript and you assign using the document.get element by ID with the ID name to a variable that particular element. And once you have established that, you can then simply call that variable name and then manipulate it using additional lines of code inside of JavaScript. So now I'm going to actually do what I want to do, which is change the actual background image. But unfortunately, I don't quite know how to change the background image of my HTML using JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my beautiful fingers, and I'm going to type out, how do you change the background image of website using JavaScript? And bam, it tells you right here. I'm waiting for it to load. But as you can see here from the quick results, it is just the background image call. So we do the same thing we did for background color, body.style, but instead of background color, you do background image. And you see how, once I put it in there correctly, you see how it changes color. If I lowercase this I, you see how it's still black. Again, black is beautiful, but for the most part, unless you are looking at a variable name, which you have here, or something like the inner HTML, which for whatever reason isn't colored, other than black, of course, you want to make sure that you have a change in color. So style.background image, and we're going to do equals, and I believe I should just be able to say nerd list 0. Since I know I don't have to retype this because I have it in a list, so I can use my list to then call it. So what this is saying is my body, which we've connected to the body of our web page, the styling of it, in the particular the style, the property we're changing, the image of the background is now going to be whatever we call here. So now let's test to see if this works. So again, we're going to refresh our page. We're looking for the basic nerd. Cool nerd, nerdy nerd, nerdy nerd, basic nerd. Something is wrong. So let's go back to our code. So this is why you need to not just look at Google, because Google doesn't tell you everything. Now that we're at W3 Schools, we can see here that we have to add in this URL, and then inside of quotes, we add in what we want it to go to. So that's what we want to do. So let's do that. So we're going to do URL. We're going to add in our parentheses. And then if we look back, we did have quotes around this. And as we taught you all before, you cannot have double quotes within double quotes. So you always alternate by using single quotes. So I'm going to use a single quote around this right here. Save it. And again, let's just look back at our reference. You can see here, this is how it looks. This is how it functions. We press this, and you see they're actually doing the same thing I'm doing, where they're using the on click for a button, and they're changing the background image. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that wonderful how that works? How when you look up code and you actually understand what it does, you can read this and be like, oh, they also use an on click, and they also have a function. Now they're using a different type of JavaScript. This is internal JavaScript, but it's the same way we did it here, but we just did it on an external page. So now let's try this again. I have a fear this won't work only because we're using instead of using the direct link like we have up here, we're using a variable, and I'm not sure if the variable will play nicely within these quotes because it kind of looks like a string right now, but let's see if it works. And this is why, again, iterative coding and running constantly helps you. So let's go here. I'm feeling lucky. We have the basic nerd. It doesn't work. So I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to take out the quotes, because right now this is just looking like a string. But if I wanted to actually refer to this list, this list within this variable, I can't have quotes around it because it's going to look like a string instead of a list. So now we've done that. Refresh our page. Cool nerd, nerdy nerd, nerdy nerd, computer nerd, basic nerd. Nothing happened. Okay, so let's check. So this is our basic nerd. Right now, basic nerd is not working using the way I'm doing it right now. So I think what I have to do is, in this case, I have to actually use the direct link. So I have to actually use this link. Again, I'm just going to suffer with you all and type it out myself. So I'm going to do nerds/basic nerd.jpg. So basically, I'm mirroring exactly how they did it inside of W3 Schools. since it clearly doesn't like the fact that I'm trying to just call it out of a list. I'm going to run this. I'm feeling lucky. GSMST nerd, basic nerd. There we have it. So again, sometimes you just have to experiment. That's one thing I really want y'all to get in your heads, is that it's okay to deviate from what you see online to see if something works, and if it doesn't, then just go back to what you know. So I knew that just calling the image outright, using its file path, the nerds / the image name, would get me to it. I want to try to see if I could just call it from within in my list using indexing, but clearly that does not work. So that's okay. I found that out. Now I won't make that mistake again. All right. So I've done that, and as you can see, and I did this purposely, but well, purposely, I didn't add in semicolons. So you don't need semicolons inside of JavaScript for it to work. So if you're looking around being like, hey, the reason why my code isn't working is because I don't have semicolons, I want you to know that yes, you're right, because you should be adding semicolons behind all your statements, but you're wrong because technically you don't need them anymore. At one point in time you did, but at this current point you don't. So, but I'm gonna again be a good coder and good programmer and add in my semicolon at the end of my statements. But you can see it works without it. So don't let that be something that you're looking for, because it's probably not the issue. All right, so we have that one, and when we change it, well, it's not going to change because since nothing else has been set up, it's going to keep it like this. All right, what else do I want to do to this? Oh, I want to change the color of our, what type of nerd are you? So I'm going to, again, go up here. Actually, no, I'm going to do it. Good coding. I'm going to say h1 equals document dot get element by ID, add in my wonderful parentheses. I'm going to go and get the ID of my h1, which was h1. Oh my goodness, it was such a descriptive name. h1. So now I'm just going to do h1 dot style dot color, because again, color is one of those things that you can change, equals, and then I'm just going to say blue, because we just want to add something there. So now I'm going to save this. Save it. Refresh this. I am waiting for this thing to load. These are some pretty high quality images, so I think that's why it's taking forever. Cool nerd. Oh my goodness, cool nerd, get out of here. Now you can see we just changed the color of that. There you go. So now we can do that same thing to our button. So I'm going to say button. Again, these aren't great names for variables. I'm going to say nerd button just to make it descriptive. Document dot get element by ID. Ooh, wrong thing. There you go. And I'm going to go and see what my nerd button, and I had it the ID. I gave the ID lucky, so I'm going to go and use that. So now I'm going to put in quotes lucky, and I'm going to do again nerd button, right? And this is all within this first if statement for the first index or the 0th index of the list, which is going to be the basic nerds. Dot style dot color, and we're going to I almost did CSS there. Equals, and then I'm going to give it the color green, because why not? These are going to be random colors, y'all. Again, we're doing it on the fly, so you can also notice how much time I'm taking on this, right? Just to write this much, because I really want you all to understand why, right? I feel like you all just do, but you don't really think of the why. And so I really want y'all to see the steps it takes to really be confident in what you're doing, and how long it sometimes can take depending on your level of comfort. If you are someone who is very comfortable with JavaScript, then of course you don't have to go this slow. But this is for the people who are really struggling and having a hard time understanding what is what and how to do this. So I'm really trying to take my time. But once you understand this, like I do, like other AP/CSP teachers do, like Ms. Calhoun and Mr. Nguyen, and some of your other fellow students, you don't have to go this slow. So don't think this is like how fast you should be going. This is definitely something that if you're still having struggles about learning and understanding what is what, this is not a bad pace to go at, okay? So let's keep on going. Again, we're gonna save, we're gonna check our code. At this point, we basically know everything we're doing right now is working, so we don't have to do this anymore. But I'm just going to do it one more time, just to, again, follow through what I've been saying this whole time. Where is the basic nerd? Why are we getting nerd and nerd and cool nerd and JSMC nerd? Where is the basic nerd? Come on, basic nerd. This number generator is not helping us at all. Come on, basic nerd. There you go. And so now our button is green, or our color is green. So now I'm actually going to do another thing where I'm going to copy this. And I know you can't copy and paste, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go do background color, and I'm going to make this blue just to help it out. And then finally, just to complete all of this, I'm going to do let, and I'm going to do, oh, actually, I already did nerd paragraph, so I'm going to actually go and make nerd paragraph dot style dot, and I'm going to do background color as well. Actually, no, I'm going to do I'll do color just to keep it simple. Again, I'm doing this thing where I'm mixing up. So this is something you might end up doing where you know, oh, I can put in a colon like you would inside of CSS, but that's not how you do it. And I'm going to do equals, and I'm now going to say I want this to be purple. I'm just giving them random stuff, y'all. And since I basically know that this is going to work because we've already done this twice now, I'm not going to test it. Also notice how color is black. So the rule of colors mattering all the time, it works like 85% of the time, but some things like with the color, it won't change, but for whatever reason, it will change it for background color. So, you know, just be mindful that if something isn't working, look at the color. Sometimes the color can help you figure out what isn't working. So this is essentially what we're going to do. That's all we're going to do. So now that we know that our first condition works, now we can just, and again, you can't do this, but I will to make this video not be an hour and a half long. I'm going to copy this and paste it. I know, shocker, right? This is the only time where I say copy and pasting is great. All right, I'm just going to modify the code essentially. So one thing we need to do is we need to make everything after the if statement an else if statement. So we're going to do else if, and that's it. Else if, and that's it. And we're going to do 5 of these. Else if, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then our final else if 5. So else if. And since I did such a beautiful job with how I did my code and how I organized it, I just have to change the index. So if index 1, if index 2, if index, hold on, did I do something wrong? Oh, I started from the wrong one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, this would be a lot for you to write and then figure out something is wrong after you've written all these if, else, if statements. So that's why we tested that one condition first before we went on ahead and we copied it, or in your case, typing it all out. So now we just need to change everything about everything. So this right here, our first index, our index number 1 is going to be computer nerd. This is the type of nerd to play Marvel Rivals when they could be partying with friends. Nope. When they could be, because we're instilling good habits with you all for Fizzenge. There you go. And I'm just going to do that for every one of them. So the second index is cool nerd. This is the nerd that blurs the line between nerd and cool. All right. So then we can say our third, we have the GSMST nerd. We're just going to say this is you. And then we're going to add in some emojis, because why not? Let's see. Just going to add in all the ones I have here, because why not? Now, you may be asking, why are these here? I don't know, but that's what we're going to do. And then finally, our last one in our list is going to be our nerdy nerd. This is what the top 1% of GSMST students are represented by. This is the type of nerd that the top 1% of GSMST students represent. And then I'm going to actually find an emoji that is just the nerd emoji. Nerd. There you go. That's you. I'm going to add a whole bunch of them. There we go. All right, now we've done that. Right now we just need to change everything else. So instead of nerds/basic nerds, we're just going to go here and just edit. So the next one we have is computer nerd. So we're going to do computer nerd. And then you just have to be careful when you're doing this, y'all, right? So if something isn't working, go back to make sure you didn't misspell anything. The next thing we have is cool nerd. So you can see how I made this really easy on myself by not changing up too much stuff. The extensions are all the same except for the GSMST nerd, which I have taken a note of. So we have the next one is GSMST nerd, and again, instead of .jpeg, it is .png. And then finally, we have our nerdy nerd. And so I'm going to go here at the bottom, nerdy nerd. And now I'm just going to randomly change stuff. So I'm going to make the H1 color for this one yellow. This may look ugly, this may look good, I don't know. We're going to make these the button red. We're going to make the background color of this corn flower blue. And then we're going to make this one indigo. I don't even know if that's actually, I'm going to make it gray. All right. For the GSMST nerd, I'm going to leave it blue, but I'm going to make the button color, I'm going to make it, I don't know, white. I'm blinking, y'all. I'm so sorry. I'm going to make this gray. I'm going to make this one violet. All right, let's change this to orange. And I'm just showing you how you can how this all basically affects everything. What's another color I could use? Plum. I'm just making everything evergreen. Seems like it's a color, so I'm going to make that the color. Sky blue also seems like a color. And then we're going to make one of these pink. I'm going to make this hot pink. And I'm going to make this periwinkle. And again, if you want to know all the different colors, you can just look up different colors and their color name or their hex color, the hex code. But right now I'm just kind of winging it. What is another color? I feel like I'm missing a whole lot of colors right now. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. What's it called? Let's do mustard up here. Again, I don't know if all these are gonna work because some of these colors I'm unsure of, like mustard, sky blue, evergreen. I'm not sure if that's how they put them in there. But essentially, we're gonna refresh our page. After we saved it, we're gonna do I'm Feeling Lucky. We got GSMST Nerd, and we got Benjamin Shapins. Yes, it is the GSMST Nerd himself. So this works. All right, let's do, I'm feeling lucky again. We got the computer nerd, and now we have the computer nerd. And look, oh, hot pink worked. This pink worked. What was the color that I put for the computer nerd? Computer nerd was second. I put this as mustard, so mustard clearly doesn't work. So let me just look up CSS colors, and I'm gonna choose a yellow that is. Let's do coral. Yeah, coral. Yeah, I'm gonna show why I didn't even look at coral. All right, save. All right, but we'll keep on going. Basic nerd, going back there. Basic nerd again. Computer nerd again. GSM machine nerd again. Where is my nerdy nerd? There you go. Nerdy nerd. Yeah, there you go. And we're missing one more nerd. I feel like we're missing a nerd. Do we go through all the nerds? Oh, cool nerd. There you go. That's me. I'm a cool nerd. That's why he's black. So you can see everything works. So now what we can do is we can now, once we know that our program worked, we can take out the alert because we don't need it anymore because we know that everything works, and we're just going to get a randomly generated nerd, and you won't know what it is before you generate it. I'm now going to go into style sheets, and now I'm just going to do some basic stuff. So if you remember how we do CSS, you simply get the you either do it by class or by the name of the element. We're not going to go through how to do classes and IDs today because you can look at it really easy, but I'm just going to change a couple things. So I'm going to do H1, and I'm going to make that text dash align, and we're going to do center. And I'm also going to go and get my button because that is also an element name on my list. And I'm going to do, again, text dash align center. And then I'm going to save this, refresh my page, and just make sure. All right, so this was center, but this one isn't, and I think it's because of centering being stupid for buttons. So I'm going to simply do what I know best, which is going to be generating this. So margin dash right. I'm going to make this 40%. And then I'm going to do margin dash left 40%. And this is going to essentially force it in the middle because the right and the left-hand side is going to go in by 40%, meaning you're going to be left with 20% of your page. 40 plus 40 plus 20 is 100%. So now when I save that and I refresh this, it does exactly what I thought it was going to do. Although it still isn't. Why is it looking all weird and awkward? There's probably a better way to do this, y'all. But for right now, again, we're just... Okay, let's lighten this up a little bit. Let's do 30%. How about this? We'll work on this later. How do I center a button? Hold on. How do you center a button in CSS? Yeah. Do I have to do that? That seems like a lot. I'm not doing that. Setting to block. Okay, so margin property to auto, and then display property to block. Again, I know what this means. You'd have to look that up, but display block, and then margin auto. Save. Even I have to look stuff up, and that's okay. There we go. Oh my goodness, it worked. See, Google is helpful, but only when you know what's happening. If I take out the display, will it still work the same? No, so you need the display block. Stunning. So now we know. So we're going to do that. And then I'm also going to change the font size of the text here, and I'm going to make it a nice clean 48 pixels, which means I'm going to make my H1 font size. I'm going to make it 72 because why in the world not? And we're going to add in of course, our pixels at the end. And other than that, just because I can, I'm going to do font dash family. And I'm just going to choose a font family, so Fantasy, just to keep it simple. So now when we save that, refresh our page, you can see here we have our I'm Feeling Lucky. Click, and you can see we have everything. And of course, we need to center our P element as well, so we need to go and do that as well. But you can see you click this button and it just goes through the different types of nerds. All right, let's go and add in our P selector, which is our P element. And then we're going to do text dash align center so that our text is centered, because everything else can't be centered and it can't not be. And while I'm here, of course, I'm going to do font dash family. I'm going to do mono space, and then I'm going to do font dash size, and I'm going to make this bigger than the button but smaller than the H1. So I'm going to make this 64. I guess 64 makes sense. I'm going to make it 64. I don't really care. All right, refresh our page. I'm Feeling Lucky. There we go. There we go. There we go. So you can see now I've created a beautiful HTML document. And if you notice, I've used almost everything you need for the create task. Now there's a couple of things that we're missing here. Like our function should have a parameter. So our function does have a parameter. So we're halfway done with the function. We have iteration with our if, else, if statements. We are using a list, right? So really all we're missing here is a loop, right? Because we have our input. Our input is you pressing the button. Your output is your literal website changing according to the randomly generated number. You could easily fix this by adding in a button for every type of nerd, and then for every single button, you could call a function of the same name with a different parameter. That would solve your function, and then figure out a way to add in a loop where it makes sense. I'll let you decide on how you would do that, but this hopefully was helpful for you all. I've been on here for 1 hour and 7 minutes and counting. Hopefully this helps you kind of conceptualize how you can do stuff and how you can combine the power of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS to make your website really pop. HTML is your structure, CSS is the styling, and JavaScript is your function. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Holmes Williams. Peace out.